We ready?
Just doing this. Welcome, sure.
See if I'm on here. Yeah.
Yeah, we're all on. All right, you can do the intro later if you want. I think we should just start. Soupkast is joined. You do it. You start.
Tonight on Soupkast we have Dennis Noyes. Help me with pronunciation here, Dennis.
Noyes.
Noyes with what's your magazine?
Motociclismo, Madrid.
Okay, let's start over again.
Yeah.
I'll do it.
Motociclismo.
I'll do it because I sold them stories. Tonight on Soupkast we have Dennis Noyes from Motociclismo Madrid, which is a great motorcycle magazine for the Spanish-speaking audience. Dennis, welcome to Soupkast.
Yeah, great to be here.
So here we are. It's Sunday night at Utah, and we had two fantastic World Superbike races today, and a fairly dominating performance by Carlos Checa on the 10 Kata Honda CBR 1000 RR. Your thoughts, Dennis?
Yeah, Carlos Checa is in this championship because he wants to be here. He could have still stayed in Moto Grand Prix. He had a couple of offers to ride perhaps for Dantine, on some of the satellite teams. They really wanted him as a Michelin tire tester. And Carlos was thinking maybe his career as a competitive rider was over. When you haven't won a race for 10 years, you start to wonder, But he's always been competitive. He's had some races that he should have won. In Brazil, for example, he was beating Valentino Rossi, and he came up on Anthony West on a twin cylinder and balked him, and he didn't win that one. There was another one in the rain, one of those divided races. He ended up losing to Valentino by, a tenth of a second or something like that. But Checa went last year to the 8 hours of Suzuka, volunteered to go, because he was riding on a Honda satellite team. They were suspicious at first because, they like to invite people. They don't like people to come as volunteers. Seti Gibernal volunteered, and they never used him. Carlos went there, got on the it wasn't Tenkate Honda, got on the factory Honda, the CBR 1000 RR, and immediately and effortlessly was faster than James Toseland. And he never tired of telling people about it after he got back to Spain either. In fact, Toseland got tired of hearing about it. They finished second, he and Taddy Okada, in that race. And after that, he had it in his mind that he wanted to go to World Superbike, and when Toseland made the move, he was right there. Garrett Tenkate didn't want him. Garrett, who really makes a lot of the decisions over there, he's the uncle. Uncle, and you were talking to Ronald in there. Garrett was thinking, I don't want another washed-up Grand Prix rider coming through here. I want somebody who's going to... who's going to be with us for a few years and help us develop a bike. That was talking on the telephone and interchanging emails. And he said when he met Carlos face-to-face, looked in his eyes, he was convinced that, Carlos was burning with what they needed.
Really dominating performance, super pole and 2 race wins, and came through. And the second one, for sure, came through looks like he made a mistake and came through and strafed like 6 bikes, go to the lead. Got a 4.5 second lead and finished the race convincingly. Amazing stuff.
And made Giorgio Barbier a very happy man because in the background, with everyone pretending that we're running on 2 different racetracks because of some kind of signage reason, there's the motif of Pirelli not wanting to face up to Dunlop but kind of wanting to face up to Dunlop, So they ended up with a virtual race facing up with Dunlop from last year and the year before. And Giorgio was very happy after the first race until he was informed that he was still running about 10 seconds slower than Ben Spee's time from last year. Now, I know he didn't go to Carlos Checa and say, go 10 seconds faster, but he was delighted to find out at the end of the day that the Pirelli SC production tires had managed to beat the Dunlop prototype tires by only 2 seconds. Of course, it was 100 degrees last year.
Yeah, I think it was 110.
I don't know what the Pirellis would be like at 110. But, really, you can't compare, Dunlop prototype race tires with Pirelli. What Pirelli does is a fantastic thing. They managed to give the same tire to everybody.
What do we got for first race results? What rounded out the podium, Evan?
We had Troy Corser was second in the first race. He crashed in the second race, but the first race he earned a podium. It was a good performance for the man who won a race here in 1995 in the United States World Superbike round at Laguna Seca.
Yeah, it looked like we were seeing a resurrection of Corser because he's been on the podium a couple of times this year, but Troy has not run as competitively up until coming back to the States. Too bad he low-sided in the second, but in the first race he was there, had good pace, and looked convincing. Usually it's been Haga who carries the ball, but of course Haga kind of took himself out of this weekend by crashing, broken collarbone in the warm-up right before Super Bowl, and then had to go out in Super Bowl. And of course, with his luck, he crashes in the warm-up before Super Bowl, and guess who's 16th qualifier, and the guy who has to go out immediately was Norrie.
Yeah. Fabrizio had a good day today.
Fabrizio had a good day, and I think we're going to see a lot more good days from Fabrizio. He had compartment syndrome that he didn't want to have the operation. He should have had that operation 2 years ago. And he was getting to the point where he couldn't tell if he was braking or not because he couldn't feel his hand. He'd have to see if the front fork is diving or not.
Yeah, that's a pretty extreme example of the compartment syndrome.
Yeah, well, he was pretty scared of the knife.
Yeah, he sounds like it.
Neukirchner was threatening for quite a while in both races, right? What did he do in race
Finished
1?
Fourth in race 1.
Near the front in race 1 and finished second in race 2.
Yeah, Max, he was running the same front tire that just about everybody was running, the harder tire. In fact, Checa was the only rider in race 1 who was running the soft B front, and only 2 riders ran it in the second race. Ruben Chaus found out about it and decided to run it. Didn't work too well for him. Of course, Ruben high-sided, so it wasn't a front tire thing. But, I don't know how Checa was able to get away with that. Pirelli technicians were trying to talk him out of it in both races. Even after he won the first race, they were trying to talk him out of it in the second.
Other than the ride-off where he let 4 or 5 guys go by, he got offline and a bunch of guys went past. Other than that, the guy was online for the whole race and very precise. Looked like he was on the proverbial rails.
Yeah,
so
he's a Moto Grand Prix rider.
And the front tire clearly worked. I mean, it looked planted.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, he would know what's working for him, and maybe they should listen to his advice a little more often.
Well, you mean Pirelli, because, obviously Tenkate do. He came into that team, and again, they didn't know what they were going to have this year because they had a young Turkish rider who's world champion in Supersport who'd never ridden a superbike. They had Ryoyu Kiyonari, coming from the British Championship with experience on Hondas but didn't know these tracks, and a new bike that was delivered late.
And they had a new bike that was delivered late, and I think that was part of the plan to get a veteran rider. They knew that they really couldn't mess around with a mid-level rider or a rookie rider for their A guy.
Yeah, Dean, one of the things that really indicated to Tenkate that they had the right guy on the bike was obviously as soon as they got the new machines, the first thing they did was put HR swing arms on them and Roberts swing arms. And Checa tried the HRC swing arm, and he tried the Roberts swing arm, and he said, let's put the stock swing arm on it. And he put that on and said, this is better. And Roberts understood immediately when he got the feedback from Checa what they needed, and they went out and built a swing arm. Now he's very happy with the Roberts swing arm. But, he said, let's use something that this bike was actually designed for.
It was kind of a devastating blow to their team when Toslin left, and you don't really see a championship team face that many obstacles. New bike, new riders.
Yeah, and to really roll over and be successful nearly immediately. So it's fantastic for them.
Yeah, they've they've had to replace riders before. Remember, they lost Chris Vermeulen. And they're still kicking themselves about that because they let Chris Vermeulen run off to Moto Grand Prix and have a couple of replacement rides for Troy Bayliss on the Cito Pons Honda. And the first thing he did was strike up a relationship with Suzuki and Paul Denning, and the next thing they knew, they had no rider. And James Toslin had just been fired by Ducati, and they signed him to come in and replace him. And then suddenly they get themselves a World Championship with Toslin, and they were offering Toslin as much as any World Superbike team can offer him. And I'm not convinced that he went to Tech 3 for more money. I think he went because he saw himself 26 years old. He said, if I fail there, I can always come back.
I believe you and I have had conversations about the money in World Superbike versus the money elsewhere. I think you said once that the salaries in America are 60% higher sometimes
Well,
than they
what I
are.
said was, and I said it a couple times, and people thought I was exaggerating, but I can do the numbers. Suzuki Yoshimura have a bigger budget than the entire World Superbike and World Supersport teams grids put together.
For riders' salaries, yeah. So it's I know a lot of riders here in the paddock are mulling over a possible move to World Superbike for next year, but they're a little bit taken aback that it basically ends up being helmet money to them as to what they'd be paid in salary for on some of these
Euro's
teams.
getting stronger now, though.
Yeah, true.
Troy Bayliss today did not have a good event.
Troy could never find a rear tire that worked for him. He had two identical crashes. He had low-sider, or high-sider rather. Well, he lost the rear, and it turned into a low-sider. The bike just suddenly moved sideways, and it just kept coming around. He couldn't catch it. He had that happen on Saturday, you recall, and then it happened again today. And before he went out for the second race, he said, mainly what I want to do is just get out of here with some points, and that didn't even happen.
Yeah, mechanical in the second race, right?
Apparently it was a gearbox lever linkage locked up and brought it in. The mechanic grabbed a hold of it and gave it a jerk, and it worked again. They sent him back out, and he did his fastest lap of the race. But by then, of course, he was finished.
Yeah,
right.
I'd heard that he raced the same bike in the second race that he had crashed in the first.
Let's see. He didn't. He was supposed to. They were so happy that they'd completely rebuilt his bike in an hour and 40 minutes, and that was the bike he was going to go out on. And for some reason, when they were warming it up, there was something he didn't like about it, and he made the decision to change.
With that kind of performance from Bayliss, unfortunate performance, it's too bad Nori Haga's weekend didn't go better because he could have really capitalized in the championship hunt.
A guy who lost the championship last year by 2 points knows the value of every point. This was the year that Haga was telling us that he was going to race with his head. We saw him race with his head yesterday, but it was on the asphalt. And the crash he had, was really an impatient crash. He ran up the inside of Soupkast and actually ran into the back of him, and it wasn't in a race. It was in a practice session.
Another guy that hit the ground, that whacked the ground, was Ruben Zaus. We call him here. The Spanish call him Chaus, correct?
Yeah, he calls himself Chaus. X is pronounced Cha. You remember Chuchos from Barcelona? Those little cream-filled...
I remember them well. And he whacked the ground hard, regardless of how his last name is pronounced. And any kind of injury report on him? We never heard anything from their press officer.
I chased him down at the clinic and then over to the Clinica Mobile. And, the first look at the clinic at his x-rays, they thought he'd broken everything. But those were all old breaks. His dad always goes with him and takes the x-rays along. It's kind of like Anthony West. Not that he has a lot of breaks, but Anthony West has such a slow heartbeat that, it's incredibly slow heartbeat, so his dad always has to go with him because they always want to rush him off in a helicopter because they think he's dead. But in Ruben's case, it was like just old breaks. He really got hit hard in the back, knocked the wind out of him, and that's really why he couldn't get off the track. It looked kind of like Mick doing at Laguna Seca in 93.
Yep, that's a good point. Haga, did you happen to see his X-ray? Someone was bandying about his actual X-ray and said the collarbone was in 3 pieces.
No, I didn't see it, but I heard about it. I heard the same as you. Haga's a magic man.
Man, if that's true, and if that thing is in 3 actual pieces, that's an Iron Man performance for sure.
I'm sure he'll have it plated now. It's got 2 weeks before Nürburgring.
See, American riders, we've kind of touched on that a little bit. It's quite an interest over here from several riders, Josh Hayes among those, about going to World Superbike racing. What's the feeling in the paddock about that, about having an American in the series?
Well, we want, the championship wants to have an American in the series. It was like we come in here, there's a lot of people with American flags, but nobody to wave them at. And this, World Superbike has been about American riders from the very beginning. When we had the 20-year anniversary celebration, Merkel was there, it's really just an economic thing, I believe. And also the fact that the cream of the crop went off to Moto Grand Prix. Colin Edwards after he won the 2002 World Superbike Championship, thought he was going HRC Moto Grand Prix, but through Nicky Hayden coming out of American Honda, had a little more push behind him, having won that championship. And John Hopkins, who never raced Superbike in this country, I don't think, but he came out of Formula Extreme and Supersport and had the right people, pushing him and placing him with Peter Clifford. But except for Ben Bostrom's unhappy experiment a couple of years ago with the graffiti team that, with all the graffiti paint on the garage.
Right, the Kenji or Koji or whatever it is, the Honda.
Yeah,
yep.
Yeah,
Didn't Haga ride for them as well the year prior?
Yeah, but not that year.
Right, the year prior. So we got Pridmore in the series right now.
Jason?
Yeah, Jason was doing World Endurance. I'm assuming he's not going to do World Endurance and World Superbike at the same time, although some do, occasionally get a ride.
Fonzie Nieto. He's an interesting case, I think.
Well, Fonzie Nieto is, he won 5 250 Grand Prix. He battled with Poggiali back when Poggiali was fast. He battled with Melandre when Melandre was coming up. With Tony Elias, he was there. He had a bad relationship with Aprilia at the end of his 250 career. He felt that he was not getting what his team had paid for, and he made the decision himself to jump to World Superbike. He went to Team Karaki. Never ridden a 4-stroke. He'd never ridden a big twin. He was in the wrong team for sure, and with the wrong teammate, because he had Lorenzo Lanzi as his teammate, and Lanzi is Tardozzi's project. So he jumped from that team to Kawasaki halfway at the end of that season, and then battled on with Kawasaki, and now he's riding with Francis Bata, and he won the second race of the season.
It always strikes me as he's a Spanish kid. He's got a lot of promise. I don't understand why he isn't being nurtured by the powers that be in MotoGP.
Well, they'd like to have him back, but they'd like to have him back on a satellite team. Really, they want... Look, in Spain, Dorna hates Superbike. They hate Superbike so badly that we don't even have a Spanish Superbike championship. We call it Formula Extreme, and we spell Extreme E-X-T-R-E-M-E, not because we want to correct the spelling, but because it turned out that the Extreme name actually ended up belonging to the same people, the Daytona Motorcycle Group. We didn't know that. So that must have been their invention.
I'm not touching that one with a 10-foot pole, but... So he's not. You think he's going to go back to MotoGP? Just sort of. He just seems like he's lost in the wrong series, maybe for his background.
Well, you didn't see him on the best of days right here. Remember he did win a race early in the year in Qatar, and when things are right, Fonzie's fast. Well, I was going to say before, Dorna wants him out of here so badly that they wanted to place him on a satellite team, and they even offered him a job as a TV commentator to try to get him over into their paddock. Because he's kind of he's a glamorous guy.
Yeah, he's kind of a celebrity icon in Spain. He's got a supermodel girlfriend and
wife now. Yeah.
Wife, and he judges swimsuit contests and Ms. Spain contests on TV and things, right?
He's one of those guys that you get for a program when you need some celebrity to come on, and he's got the Marlon Brando eyebrows, the look, the whole thing, but he does it on a motorcycle too.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about you. You've been in motorcycle racing for 30 years?
I didn't learn to ride a motorcycle until I was about 24. I was supposed to be going to school and doing serious things, and went to Spain, and after having been in South America for a while and sort of generally running around, and every stoplight in Spain was like start of a Grand Prix. There were Lobito Bultacos and Metrallas, Osas, Ducati 24 hours, and they would all go to the front of the queue, and they would actually sit there, and make it a race. When the light changed, off they went. You didn't want to be a slow pedestrian crossing, but Barcelona they had all the factories there. There was such an atmosphere about motorcycle racing. I was teaching English in the North American Institute, looking out over Via Augusta, which was a 6-lane double direction street, which a lot of the racing teams used to carburate their bikes before the 24 hours. I remember the factory Ducati used to come thundering down there, about 9 o'clock at night when I was teaching my last class, with Ricardo Fargas riding the thing, or Juanin Rodés on the Norton would go by, and it just was kind of in the air. And I had raced stock cars when I was a kid, dirt track stock cars, Chrysler New Yorker, 2 4-barrels, a magnet, and a quick change rear end. Hoopeston, Illinois, number 88. He's got rocks in his socks tonight. And I promised my family, in order for them to pay my way to the university, that I'd never race cars again. And so I didn't.
That's great.
So I lived in Spain for a few years and actually got kicked out of there by the Franco. I mean, basically because I wasn't Spanish. The first race I ever rode was at Jarama on a Ducati 24 hours, and I finished third, and Franco's wife, Maria Carmen Polo de Franco, put the laurel around my neck. But then when they discovered that I was, a foreigner, they didn't take the laurel back, but they took the license back.
Wow.
Exiled to England for 10 years.
And you've got to have an entertaining Dr. T story from that era. Do you have one?
Dr. Fabio Taglioni. Gosh, yeah. I used to when I was racing in Spain. When they finally gave me a license, I ran with Ducatis, and I used to go over to. Ducati was always on strike. They were always about bankrupt, and they were usually surrounded by policemen and pickets. And the competition department was sometimes hard to reach. And I used to go to Spain on my bike, take the ferry over, and then ride on over to Bologna to get spares hand-delivered because they couldn't mail anything out of the factory. Get a couple cams or some valves or even a whole head. And I remember I went to the factory one time. Franco Farnet was the kid there. He was the sort of guy that helped out. He was Fabio's right-hand man. And apparently Dr. Taglioni had not had a vacation forever. And the union had forced him to take a vacation. So they'd sent him home, basically. And I said, well, I need to talk to, El Dottore about, these cams that they want to use in the 24 hours. And he said, don't worry, he'll be here in the laundry van. And the laundry van backed up and, they opened the door and the smoke came out because he was always smoking, and the great doctor appeared.
I think if you really wanted to sum up Dr. T, there's a photo of him at his desk at Ducati, and he's kind of standing there in an aristocratic way, and he's wearing a cape at work. I think that really sums the guy up. Do you agree?
Yeah. He was Italy's youngest engineer at one time when he graduated from the university, and he had I remember they used you might have heard this story before, but I never saw it, but I was told that it was true. They used a Ducati V4 Atlas engine as a doorstop in the place because they built that.
No, I didn't know that.
They built that for the American police.
The Berliner brothers were behind that, weren't they?
And the only surviving casts of that were used as a doorstop. Yeah, because they would knock the single over when there were heavy winds, but the big Atlas would stand it.
Didn't they have a test track at Ducati at one time, like an in-house test track there?
It was like I rode that test track. In fact, I rode the first Ducati Panda on that track. Where
was it? Is it where the parking lot is now?
It was. There were cars parked around. There were piles of equipment. It was not as hairy as the Suzuki test track at Ryuyo. That track was dangerous. Well, we used to test in Spain also on the open roads. That's how Ricardo Tormo's career ended. Remember, he was testing the factory derby on the ring road around the factory, and they put a couple of mechanics out to stop people from coming onto the road. But one of the mechanics was a kind of frightening-looking guy, and a woman came up and stopped, and he started to run at her, and she thought he was going to attack her, so she pulled out right in front of Ricardo.
Oh, man.
But anyway, Ducati did have a test track there. It was probably about 3/8 of a mile all around, and you couldn't wind anything out, but you could see if you had a misfire in second gear.
I'm unclear on where the runoff would be then. Did they run it right to that wall? The walls around?
Yeah, I don't remember a lot of runoff, but remember I was racing Montjuic every year too. I know in Montjuic we had runoff in two places. You could crash at Guardia Urbana, and you could crash at the Bajada going down to Font de Gat, the Cat Fountain, and that was it. Every place else and also for the hairpin over the top of the hill.
Yeah, must have. I'd love to see a photo of that test track sometime, because I just can't stand when you stand there in the parking lot and someone says this used to be the test track. It's really difficult to put it together as to how exactly that worked, because there's houses and buildings that have been there for 150 years at least, around everywhere. So.
All I remember is they said, "You want to try the Ponda?" And I said, "Yeah." And they said, "Well, get your helmet and come on out." And I was wearing a jacket, blue jeans, motorcycle boots and gloves, those thin piano kind of gloves we used to wear with the studs in them.
When I was in high school, I read a lot of your stuff in Cycle News about the famed, or infamous would probably be a better way to describe it, NR 500 project with Honda. Back then, you were filing a lot of stuff, and it was quite interesting, an interesting period in Honda's history. Yeah,
and the last time that I went to Japan on an official visit, they put us on a bus to drive us out to the factory, and decided to, since we were trapped in the bus, they gave us the politically correct story for the entire trip of how that project was actually not the tremendous failure that it looked.
I was going to use the word debacle, but go ahead.
Debacle, that it was actually it was the birth of all the great ideas that have produced the.
But yeah, you could probably certainly see that. Certainly, they did a lot of research there and probably learned a lot from their mistakes.
They said you learn a lot from your failures. So.
Yeah, Faulkner says you judge a man by the magnificence of his failures. So
And do you remember the first time you heard it run?
Let's see. The first time I heard it run would have been at.
For those that are listening that aren't up to speed on the NR 500, why don't you describe it, Dennis?
Well, it was a. You know what I think it really was? I think it was a V8 to begin with, because Honda were convinced that they could convince the FIM that four-stroke should be allowed more cylinders than two-strokes. At that time the limit was 4 cylinders, because Volker Rauch, the late German Grand Prix reporter, who had a really good relationship with HRC, claimed to have seen that bike, that engine, with 8 separate cylinders. And then what happened was, now I don't know if this is true, but the idea was that since that idea got canned, the idea of the oval piston was the best way to get V8 power out of a notional, 4-cylinder engine. Again, I think the first time I saw that thing was probably at Silverstone.
And it was a oval piston V4 motorcycle engine, correct?
In the late 70s, I guess, huh?
It would have come in, Roberts came in 78, so that came in 79. You date everything by, before Kenny and after Kenny.
BK and AK.
That's right.
And
BKR and AKR, yeah.
That was Honda's big heralded return to Grand Prix after they had pulled out in the late 60s, right? And,
that's right, and they persevered with that.
Did they ever. They had guys all over the world racing that thing and pushing it in England, pushing it in America, and things like that.
Yeah, they had Ron Haslam in Japan riding the thing. He was even, they said they did some testing on it down the long hallway inside the factory that they were doing. And he was riding it. There were some doors, big doors, that when one of the mechanics rode the bike up against those doors, hit the doors with the front wheel, the doors flew open inside. He got on the bike, and they told him to take the bike back into the other garage, and he thought that maybe that's the way you did it, but the doors only opened one way. So he slammed right into the doors,
So goes the story.
They had to bribe their way onto the grid in France. In the second race of the season, they didn't qualify.
Right.
And they had to pay. The first race was a total disaster because I can't remember the order who crashed first. Seemed like Mick Grant crashed on the first corner and Katayama came by and crashed on his oil, or vice versa.
There's a really good Matt Oxley's book on the Honda history book that he did has a really good several chapters on the NR period. And
didn't that bike win a heat race at Laguna Seca?
Yeah, with Freddie on it.
With Freddie on it, riding against Randy Momola.
And KR, wasn't it? Or was that? Yeah, I think so.
It was a short race.
He won the heat race, and then didn't he crash in somebody's oil in the race or something along those lines?
I don't know. I wasn't here. That's back when Laguna Seca was such an important international race that the FIM wouldn't schedule a Grand Prix on the same. There were 2 days that were sacrosanct. There was the day that they ran the Isle of Man, or the week they ran the Isle of Man, and then there was the Laguna Seca United States, whatever they called it, Grand Prix, even though it wasn't a points race.
Yeah, I think what did Freddie say after he won the race? He just kept the thing on the power band, which was like at 22,000 RPM. Isn't that what it was, or something? Something like that, and just kept it in the power band no matter what he had to do, and he was able to pull off a win in the heat race. And I think that was the single win of that bike.
I think it never scored a point in the World Championship.
That's correct.
If I'm correct.
Yeah, Freddie was running in 5th place with that bike at Silverstone. The last time that bike was run, that would have been 1980, and he had permission to rev it as far as it had rev, and he blew up on about lap 6 or something, but they were running in 5th place.
Yeah, that's signature Freddie Spencer. You know, he was really able to keep those things with a very narrow power band and keep it in the power and ride it fast. I think he did that at Brands Hatch at the match races on Irv's Yamaha that time, and he later Irv sold that bike to I can't remember the guy's name who he sold it to. That Kerry Bryant. And Bryant tried to ride the bike, basically set up with that C&J frame, and basically the way Freddie rode it. And I think he just raced it a few times, and he just said there's no way. There's absolutely no way.
Did Irv ever tell you the story about the first time they tested the 3-cylinder Honda in Brazil with Freddie?
Is that the one where they gave Freddie like 5 different bikes and they were all drastically different, and Freddie came back and, I mean, he did the same exact lap time on every single bike, and they were so different it was impossible, and no matter what they threw at him, he could ride fast. I heard that story.
Well, the way Irv told me that was, I don't know how many bikes there were, but there were certainly some very different setups. And Irv would send Freddie out on the bike with one setup, and Freddie would come back, and Irv would say, "How was that?" And Freddie would say, "That was pretty good. You know, that was okay." So he'd make some minor change and say, "Well, what'd you think of that?" And Freddie, "That's pretty good, you know." So then he'd change it really, you know, like wheels, you know, up in the air, sort of. And Freddie would come back and say, "Yeah, that was, you know, it took me a while to understand that, but that worked pretty good." And they were getting nowhere. So Irv came up with a plan. In the afternoon, Freddie had 3 new helmets. So he put a helmet on his head, sent him out on one setup, came back, put another helmet on his head, put another helmet on his head, then measured the amount of perspiration inside the helmets, decided the driest helmet must be the one that was close.
Oh, that is such classic Irv.
And classic Freddie, too.
It is classic Freddie.
Get some family in the racing business these days, huh?
Yeah, I do.
Let's hear about that.
Well, you know, my son Kenny, don't know why we named him that. Must have had an uncle or something named Kenny or something. Anyway, you know, he grew up in Spain, played soccer, did all that stuff. But when I was working in Solomoto, we could get a hold of some free bikes once in a while, you know, 80cc Kawasaki, Merlins. And from the beginning, he was real taken by the stories I used to tell him as a kid about Kenny Roberts, the dirt tracker. And we organized some dirt track races in Spain, too. We did it in the Palau San Jordi, which is an indoor stadium. We organized some races in Jerez. And so we built a little dirt tracker out of an 80cc Kawasaki and went out to some public land, Cañada, which is an area for pasture, and built an 8-mile track out there. You know, and he rode, but he didn't do motocross, but he always wanted to race. So when we moved to America, because I was working for Dorna at that time, and they sent me over to run the U.S. Grand Prix at Laguna Seca in '93, which is a terrible experience, you know. But it was a good experience because it got me back to America, and it got Kenny in an atmosphere where he could actually race dirt track, Lodi Cycle Bowl, you know, every weekend. He did 5 years as a dirt tracker and eventually won that. Remember the Pro Singles?
Yes, I do.
What was the name of that? I want to say Head something head.com.
Wrenchhead.com.
Yeah.
Wrenchhead.com.
And that was, anyway, he won that thing. And at that point in time, we had still been living in the States, and I thought, okay, now we make the move to an XR 750. And we were working on putting something together with Dale Lineweaver, who was the guy who prepared his Husaberg, who won the single-cylinder championship with. And I was talking to my friends in Spain, because I've always been based in Spain. And I was trying to find sponsorship. And they were saying, you're crazy. We're not going to find any sponsorship in Spain for a guy riding a Harley-Davidson. Send him over here. We'll put him on a 600. So it was a BQR team. It was just a Grand Prix team. And I said, look, he's never road raced. And they said, come on. Of course he's road raced, And the first time he went down the straightaway at Valencia, long straight, not as long as here, but a long straight, came into turn one, instincts were no front brake. So he did the whole thing just stomping on the rear and going in sideways with smoking tires. So he had a big learning curve. But now he's going good. He's had 3 podiums this year. He won a second in a World Endurance Round, Suzuki Cup race. And, he's at the point now where I'm hoping that he'll get a super sport ride or maybe even come to America. You
made him get an education before he went racing, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. Made him go to college for a couple of years. He sort of went to college, but I kind of learned later that he kept a Husaberg in his room and didn't go to too many classes,
He's a born motorcyclist.
At Davis, Davis, California. He was aeronautical engineering, I think, is what we were studying.
When he wasn't riding.
He was riding most of the time.
I think he might have been in the shop, but he might have been working on his bike, huh?
He was mainly at Lodi and...
How about one good Kenny Roberts story, Dennis? You've got to have just one that we could tell the public.
And not get sued.
Well, how about the most recent one?
Go ahead.
Okay.
Is this the gun one that's been going through the paddock all weekend?
All right. Yeah. I mean, Kenny's wife is Japanese, and of course Kageyama, Yukio Kageyama, and Noriyuki Haga, and their wives keep in touch with Kenny's wife to make sure she's all right, and they need to check once in a while, and they always visit Kenny at the ranch at Hickman. And while they were there, first of all, they played some golf. Haga and Kenny went out and played golf, and I think Haga was dominant over the first 18 and thought that was it. And Kenny said, you don't come to my house and quit while you're ahead. So they got to play another 18.
We play until I win. I can hear him saying it.
Well, that's right. And Haga said he was hungry, and Kenny thought, this is my opportunity. So he took him out to an In-N-Out and got him a jalapeno hamburger, and after that he said he couldn't hit anything. Meanwhile, Yukio didn't want to play golf, but he was fascinated by all the guns because Kenny's got, he's got some weapons there. He could be an Afghan warlord, if he had half a chance, And he found a Eastwood, Magnum, but the 50 caliber.
Yeah, the 50 caliber handgun, right?
Not the 44, but the Moto Grand Prix version of the.
Yes, that's Magnum. What Kenny would have.
And so Kenny explained to Kageyama that you want to be careful of this thing because it kicks. But Kageyama didn't know what kicks meant, but he found out and came here with a bruised hand.
Yeah, Roberts only warns once, doesn't he? He probably just said it one time.
I went to his house one time with Peter Starr, and Starr had a trunk full of machine guns or something. Anyway, I've seen Kenny do two things in my life and also in his, which are impossible to my way of thinking. One of them was I saw him jump over a guardrail at Brands Hatch that was about waist high, but he did it walking sideways along, and he just suddenly was on the other side of the thing. And I went out afterward and nearly killed myself trying to do that, and I'm still getting Dean Miller to try and explain how that kind of thing can happen. The other thing I saw Kenny do that was impossible was at the ranch. One time he had an old Winchester, and we were, he suddenly said, shut up, as he would. And he froze, kind of like a cast iron lawn animal, or a cast iron lawn cowboy. And he had that rifle at his hip, and he was just dead quiet, like he didn't breathe. And it must have been 15, 20 seconds. And then he fired, and about 50 yards away, a rabbit was destroyed. And,
wow.
I didn't know you could do that from the hip.
He's an amazing man. I think we'll all agree on that. And the machine gun story, how did that end up?
No, that was nothing particular. I just fired the machine gun a while, but then that saved a lot of money on earplugs for a long time after that. Kenny said, "Did you wear earplugs?" Well, actually, what he did was he just mouthed the words. Scared me to death because I couldn't hear anything.
Well, Dennis, we don't want to take too much of your time, but this is quite enjoyable, and I'm sure everyone out there in Soupkast land has enjoyed it.
World Superbike only gets to the States every 4 years, and up till now, Carlos Checa only wins every decade. So we got.
It's a special day. It's a special day. I think we'll all agree on that. Anyway, thank you for joining us, and I'm sure we'll see you down the road at a racetrack very soon. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Dennis.
Yep.
Beautiful. That was nice. Fantastic.